The book of Isaiah has always been important in the history of the church. It received the name of the fifth gospel. And so I think that when people think about reading Isaiah, they're naturally going to be attracted to passages that they've heard in Handel's Messiah, like comfort ye, or the government shall be upon his shoulders. And you see these promises of a kind of hope for messianic figure that we see in Jesus Christ and that we celebrate wonderfully, for example, the promise of a child who will be called Emmanuel, right? But one of the surprising things, when people actually start reading the book of Isaiah, they're like, whoa, there are actually very few individual passages that talk about a future messianic figure. But a lot of what we get in Isaiah from the very opening of the book is prophetic in the sense of calling people out for their sin. And so from the very start of the book, God's people are referred to as like they're dumber than donkeys and oxen. They're referred to, if you will, as prostitutes. They're referred to in really graphic language. Their leaders are said to be worse than Sodom and Gomorrah, because what the prophetic word is often doing is helping provide people who are blinded to the reality that they're in, to how God's really viewing them. And here are God's people being told that they are completely off base because their lives don't align with God's desire for justice and righteousness for the poor. So what we see then in the prophetic book of Isaiah isn't just simply promises about a distant future kingdom, but is really aiming to unearth, if you will, and get rid of the accruing sin that is clogging the arteries of God's people, but trying to flush that out so that Israel and God's people can come to life again and live as they are supposed to as God's people. So I think that's one surprise that people find when they actually sit down to read Isaiah. The other thing that I think is surprising when you read Isaiah is you'll see a range of different prophecies in there, and you can kind of get confused and say, is there an actual storyline unfolding here in the book of Isaiah? And that's surprising to people when there actually does begin to be a storyline that becomes emergent throughout the book. In the first phase of the story, you have God as this holy king who's going to be bringing judgment against his people for their sin. He's going to be using Assyria and Babylon to judge them and to ultimately take them into exile. Now, you primarily see that in chapters 1 to 39. Phase 2 of the story begins to unfold when you get to chapter 40. And the word there is that, yes, God is a holy king who's brought judgment against you, but that's not the final word. God is going to raise up a figure, and is actually referred to as a Messiah, King Cyrus of Persia. And God is going to use King Cyrus of Persia to allow God's people to return back home to Israel and rebuild the land. But then the story doesn't end there. In 49 to 55, the story continues by saying, yes, I've allowed an initial return back from exile, but a greater restoration needs to happen. And there's going to be a suffering servant who enables Israel not simply to have only their sin atoned for and dealt with, but also all nations will have their sins atoned for and dealt with, and therefore they'll be brought back into reconciliation with God through a surprising work through the suffering of God's servant. But the story doesn't end there. Those who have become followers of the servant, those who become washed by the blood of the servant, are invited in 56 to 66 to live as the servants of the Lord. How do you live in the meantime while you wait for an even more ultimate judgment, an ultimate salvation, when you await the new heavens and the new earth, when God comes again in final judgment and salvation? And so the final part of the book tells the story of how the God's servants are to live as faithful agents, trusting in God, promoting justice and righteousness during a time while they're waiting the final work of the Lord. So that big picture story of Isaiah is something also that can sometimes surprise people when Isaiah at first feels just like a massive ocean that you're diving into of 66 books. And once you figure out there actually is a current running through this that gives you a bigger sense of the story, all of a sudden the whole book falls into place.